My name is Evan Schmidt. I am the CEO of Valley Vision. Valley Vision is the regional convener for the Capital Region Community Economic Resilience Fund. That's the CERF fund. And we can go to the next slide, please. And Valley Vision is also a nonprofit here in the Capital Region. We are devoted to livability, so creating livable communities through creating economic prosperity, environmental sustainability, and social equity. And we're here as your regional convener for CERF to bring our coalition together for our second webinar of the summer. And we can go to the next slide, please. I see people are still introducing themselves. Thank you for that. So the purpose of our webinar today, first, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the objectives of the CERF program itself. And I hope this is familiar to most of you. And I know some of you might have come to our first session in June, where we brought everybody together to learn together. We had Professor Manuel Pastor talking about inclusive economic growth and development. And for some of you, maybe this is the first time. But this Community Economic Resilience Fund program itself is a program for regions across the state of California to advance inclusive economic development and also low carbon economic development. So really looking at, as new types of economies are emerging in California, how are we creating accessible career pipelines and inclusive economic opportunity within those economies. So the purpose of the CERF program is to support the development of meaningfully inclusive regional planning processes. So what that really means is Valley Vision, as the regional convener, is bringing a coalition together to make decisions together, to prioritize and advance projects together, and to really create this vision and this roadmap for economic development in our 8-county region. And that really includes the creation of accessible and high quality jobs in sustainable industries here in the region. We also want to create a situation where we can invest in projects, or the state can invest in projects that are proposed by our regional planning process. So the state program itself is very much aligned with creating equity, supporting equitable processes and inclusive processes, and creating high quality jobs and sustainability in regions across the state of California. Finally, through the planning phase that we're in right now, we want to align and leverage state investments. So we really want to create implementation opportunities within the CERF program itself, but we also want to identify where we can get our big, high priority, ambitious projects funded elsewhere. So we want to be able to kind of leverage and maximize the high priorities that we have and the opportunities that we have here in the region. And this planning phase that we're in right now for the CERF program is really our opportunity to do that. So that's a little bit about the CERF program itself. I want to make sure I talk about kind of what we're going to be doing today and what the purpose of these sessions are. So the purpose of these sessions is really to create this common framework for all of us as a coalition to work through our planning phase together and to really think together about inclusive and low carbon economic growth in our region. What does it mean? What are the values that we're bringing into this? And how are we going to work together on this? And so this session it's webinar style. So we really are trying to bring in kind of learning opportunities, bring in different voices, bring in examples from across the state that we can all learn about and understand more about what it really means to be doing inclusive economic growth in our region. The format that we have today is that we have kind of 3 different sections that we're going to do. First, we're going to be really excited to invite a panel that's going to kind of talk about opportunities that they're taking advantage of across the state. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Then we're going to talk to our research partner, the Brookings Institution and Cities GPS, to talk about what kind of research activities are underway. We're going to talk about areas where you can get involved. We're going to give you updates around what's been going on so far, and then we're going to talk about what's coming next. So our first session that we're going to is bringing a panel of people together from across our state who received funding from the CERF pilot program. So the state agencies created a pilot program to fund early on in the process projects from across the state that really embody the goals and values of the CERF program. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to really get grounded in what do these programs look like? What do these projects look like? What are the types of things that the state is looking to fund as part of the SERF program? And having this really grounded view of what do these projects looks like, our hope is really to create the opportunity and create the ability for us to develop projects here in the region with that learning in mind. So with that, I'm really excited to bring these folks onto our virtual stage today. And I'm also really pleased to introduce Jose Bodipo-Memba, who is the Chief Diversity Officer with SMUD, also a trusted partner in the Capital Region SERF program, a trusted partner of Valley Vision, and likely a trusted partner of many of you. Jose is somebody who really does have his finger on the pulse of what's going on in our capital region when we're thinking of inclusive, low carbon opportunities and growth here in the region. So with that, I'll invite Jose to introduce our panel and to bring us into our next session of the agenda.
Thank you so much, Evan. Really honored and excited. Again, my name is Jose Bodipo-Memba. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer at SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utility District. We are the electric utility provider for Sacramento County. And a key component of what SMUD is about is ensuring that this entire region benefits from what we do. For those of you who don't know, SMUD is in the process of implementing its 2030 zero carbon plan. And a key component of that plan is ensuring that all communities are part of the benefit of that plan, from an economic standpoint, from a workforce standpoint, from a health and environmental standpoint. And that's why we're so excited about partnering with SERF in the SERF awardees that we're going to be talking to on this panel today, because we really see this as a way for the entire region and for the entire state to benefit from a quality of life standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and from an overall environmental standpoint as well. And so just really excited to share and learn from each of the panelists that were awarded as a part of the first SERF Awards earlier this year. And I want to introduce those panelists right now. So our first panel member is Corrine Campos. Corrine is the Vice President of Impact and Resource Development for United Way, Fresno, and Madera County. Corrine previously served as the CEO of Focus Forward, working with youth in the justice and foster care systems. And a Central California native, Corrine has committed her career to advancing economic access and equity for and with systemically marginalized communities. Corrine, thank you so much for participating as a part of this panel.
Thank you so much, Jose.
Our second panelist is Sam Greenlee. Sam is the Executive Director for Alchemist Community Development Corporation. Alchemist is a great organization here in the Sacramento region. Sam joined in 2020 after 6 years in the professional food safety industry and several years of community organizing as the co-founder of the Oak Park Fix-It Cafe, which is located in his home community. And Sam has been doing some amazing things with Alchemist. Thanks again for being on the panel. And last and definitely not least on our panel is Tanya Dose. And if I said your name wrong, Tanya, I apologize. She's the Executive Director of the Siskiyou Economic Development Council, SEDC. Tanya joined SEDC in 2005 and has over 20 years of experience in economic development, specializing in rural communities. She serves as the advisory board for the North State Community Economic Resilience Partnership. And also in 2020 was honored by the California Local Economic Development Association as one of its 40 most outstanding economic development professionals in the last 40 years. Thank you so much again for joining the panel. So as you can see here, we have some very heavy hitters, and I could go on and tell you more about their projects, but what better than to hear about the projects from the people themselves who are implementing them. So if you could, introduce yourself a little more in depth and tell us more about your projects. And maybe let's start off with Corrine.
Thank you. Absolutely. And I so appreciate that warm introduction. And that was quite detailed. So I won't add many more details to me, but what I will do is just share my excitement and enthusiasm for our SERF project. And so we're focused in one of the Central Valley regions. So I know obviously my United Way is in Fresno and Madera counties, But our SERF project is through Fresno, Madera, Kings, and Tulare. And so for us, that's not mission creep because we know that we don't need to be personally stepping into all of those communities. What we are a part of is this overarching regional plan through our local Central Valley Community Foundation's Drive Initiative. And so in many ways, we had begun a journey of inclusive economies work a couple of years ago, which really then well positioned us for something like SERF. I think that what makes this project different is that we hadn't done it with this level of focus, and that the drive plan as a whole was very Fresno specific. And so SERF has really created this accelerant to have organizations really create an opportunity to cultivate a plan into other counties. And the benefit that we have is that through our partners and other United Ways, we have access to these communities. And so from a very high level, because I know we're going to talk more about this, our project really includes a social infrastructure and barrier removal piece centered around whole person care. So we really can make sure that people get the resources that they need to really see a vibrant economy. And that's really coupling workforce development with entrepreneurial training and daily barrier removal of households like housing, access to food, everything that it needs to see an individual or a family thrive. And that also includes a model demonstration on a digital infrastructure pilot, because like so many communities throughout the state of California, we have digital deserts, not just in our rural community, but in our urban community. And in 2023, we have to make sure that everybody can have digital access, because that is your access to workforce development, telehealth, mobile banking, the list goes on and on. And so we've looked at what the highest and greatest needs and gaps have been in our economic mobility work, and we've leaned into those areas. And then the other thing I would add before I hand it over to our colleagues here is that we also have an electric vehicle and green track focus for workforce development embedded to contribute to an overall carbon neutral economy. So that's a little bit about our project.
Extremely exciting, Corinne. Looking forward to kind of even getting deeper into the project. Thank you. Sam, how about you? I'd love to hear a little more about what's happening with Alchemist.
Thank you. And I really enjoyed that intro to what's going on in Fresno. Yeah, so Alchemist CDC, we're a Sacramento-based nonprofit. Our mission is to connect communities to land, food, and opportunity. Our three ongoing programs involve providing EBT CalFresh access at farmers markets in the region, place-based community development through our neighborhood empowerment program. So we've created community gardens and green spaces in neighborhoods that are underserved as a way to help empower neighbors and bring them together. And then most relevant to this, our Alchemist Kitchen program, which is a food entrepreneurship program broken into two parts, a micro enterprise academy, a 12-week course, and an incubator program, in which we work with underserved and under-resourced entrepreneurs to start successful food businesses as a way to have financial empowerment. So our project for SERF is Alchemist Public Market, which really brings those three streams together. At its core, it is about the food entrepreneurship. So we are developing about 0.8 acres in Sacramento's River District into kind of a campus with a main building that really centers on a shared use commissary kitchen, where about 40 small businesses will be able to be incubating, working at a time. We currently already have a kitchen that we're leasing that's temporary. We've been doing proof of concept, but this will have businesses who are doing catering, packaged food. They'll actually have affordable access to a really great kitchen where they can launch their business for a few years before they can move out on their own. That building will also feature a social enterprise cafe operated by one of our nonprofit partners, NorCal Resist. So they'll be doing a workforce development program, training recent immigrants and refugees in particular with new U.S. work authorization as baristas, working in retail, kind of across the spectrum in various food service roles to help place them into more permanent first jobs in the U.S. We'll have a Sacramento-made store featuring things from these small makers incubating our programs and others like them. And then we have a larger outdoor space. We have a kind of an outdoor food hall with 8 mini restaurants. We call them food pods. They're basically food trucks that are permanent structures. And these are little individual commercial kitchens where businesses in our program who want to start a restaurant or a food truck can incubate for about 3 years. They share outdoor dining space. They share a lot of resources, but they get to get up and running, build sales data so they can eventually get SBA loan and move out into a space of their own. We'll be hosting a certified farmers market on site with EBT access, of course. Gonna have, there's a lot more to go on, but I think I'm running short on time here, so I will just stop right there.
Thanks, Sam. And I'm sure we're gonna get a chance to get even more in depth with some of the questions down the line, but thanks for the high level. Tanya, would love to hear about what's happening in the north part of the state with your CERF award.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you for inviting me to join you this afternoon. It's an honor to be among these other project recipients, and I'm just really pleased to share a little bit about our project and our work. So I am in Siskiyou County, so on the farthest northern border of California. We are one of the most rural counties in California and one of the largest counties in California as well. The project that we were awarded is our work in providing innovation opportunities for Siskiyou's working landscapes. So our work is kind of a compilation or a portfolio of programs targeted to support the businesses and industries that make up Siskiyou's working landscapes and our neighboring counties here in the North State region. We really believe that this is our economic DNA. And so we really want to support those businesses in agriculture, wood utilization, outdoor recreation, clean energy. They are our past, our present, and our future. And as we look to the work we do, we see that we need to have opportunities for extraordinary innovation and climate adaptation within these industries and businesses and at the community level. So we are a really small nonprofit here in Siskiyou. We've been around for a long time. So in all of those years, working consistently within our communities, we've compiled this body of work that includes today everything from brownfields redevelopment to operating the destination marketing organization for our county to operating our small business development center. We have a program called Siskiyou Farm Co., which is a direct-to-consumer marketplace for agriculture producers. We have been honored to be selected as one of California's iHubs, and we are also recently selected to lead a regional climate collaborative for the state of California. So that's a lot, but it pales when you look at what everybody else is doing. So we've got so much work to do. The project we were awarded combines all of that work and supplements it with some programming dollars. But it also and prominently is a built asset for us that will be truly a bright light for our small communities. It'll be, we are renovating and repurposing a Carnegie Library in the city of Wairika into this place-based anchor for all of our work. It's not a very large facility, but it's going to be an opportunity for us to showcase everything from green energy to green building strategies to historic renovation to the modeling of capital stacks that work in rural communities to, and it's something that we don't have. It'll be an asset like no other in our region. The other thing that I think really highlighted our work was a lot of regional collaboration. So really working within our ecosystem to create partnerships and to lift each other up and support one another's work. So happy to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Again, 3 really great projects, 3 very unique approaches. And I think that's one of the goals of CERF, is addressing the needs of each of the different regions that we serve. So after hearing the 3 descriptions, again, one of the goals is to catalyze, high growth, low carbon industry and high quality jobs as a part of the process. You've all described very different approaches on how to do that. Can you also talk about how each of you are addressing issues related to inclusivity and equity as a part of your project and as a part of the implementation process that you're going through? And Sam, you talked a little bit about the impact on recent immigrants as part of your project. I'd love to hear more about the inclusivity component and the equity component.
Sure. So I think I'll start off addressing the issue of like how we are defining equity and move a little bit more specifically. I'm actually just going to read from Alchemist's racial equity statement that we have, because I think it gives a good sense. But so we understand that the problems we're working to address, disparities in access to healthy food, green spaces, and entrepreneurship, they're symptoms of a greater societal system that was built for some and to discriminate against others. We also recognize that Sacramento's own history of redlining, redevelopment, and racial covenants have created barriers where race is the primary reason that a person faces additional hurdles. By almost every metric, Black, Indigenous, and people of color suffer disadvantages and worse quality of life outcomes than their white neighbors. And we also recognize that a person's race intersects with other social and political identities, gender, sexuality, national origin, documentation status, which all overlap and create different forms of discrimination and disadvantage. So we acknowledge our responsibility to dismantle white supremacy, uphold the experiences of people of color, and advance equitable change. So toward that end, we define racial equity as reforming, redesigning, and replacing assumptions, processes, and systems at all levels to eliminate and prevent racial discrimination and disadvantage. An equitable society is one where systems are collaboratively planned and built with the community, and all people have access to what they need to prosper and thrive. And what that looks like, in this project in particular, it really is the outgrowth of our mature programs where we have deep roots in the community. We hear from people what is needed. Like I said, our food entrepreneurship program is ongoing. We have people in our incubator program now, in our kitchen now. We hear about the barriers that they have, the lack of capital, the lack of market entry, these sorts of issues. And so the project has been specifically designed to kind of address these gaps. We've really looked at, starting a food business is its own very unique set of barriers. Starting any business has a lot of issues, but if you're coming at it without a wealthy uncle to invest in your business from the start, or something along those lines, it's very, there's a whole other set of challenges. And so our model here has been to provide people kind of that runway they need and the resources needed to get off the ground until they can hit sustainability and really have a chance to build on their own. I mean, obviously we're bringing in the food access as well, the farmers market with EBT, creating a community gathering place that we hope will be really hospitable and fully inclusive. But we've really tried to center inclusivity and equity from the start. It's been over 3 years of working on this project and preparing it. I'll stop there due to time.
No, Sam, appreciate that, and appreciate also just providing some context in terms of kind of where Alchemist stands in its statement on equity. And Tanya, I'd like to pass it to you. In Siskiyou County, inclusivity and equity might be a different conversation. Would love to hear how it's being addressed.
Absolutely. So I will share with you that our lens as a rural community, we are, we have this like really chronic history of being severely disinvested in, and chronic poverty, low wages, high unemployment, extreme dependence on government support, again, uber rural. So think about the communities that comprise Siskiyou County. We are a county of about 44,000 people. our cities range in size from, I'm not kidding, 800 to about 7,000 being this county seat. And so, just a vastness that it's hard to bring resources into these communities because the capacity simply isn't there. We have these communities that really just need to be reinvested in and lifted up. So that's kind of our lens as far as showcasing equity. And I also, our whole project is designed to create opportunities to support investment in our communities and lead to economic opportunities for our residents and create, high wage employment opportunities and lift up these communities and residents. So it is a very different lens, but I think also one that's really important.
Appreciate that, Tanya. I appreciate the context as well. Corinne, this seems to be right in your wheelhouse. It seems like the majority of your career has really been spent in the equity and inclusivity space. How does that play into what United Way is doing as a part of CERF?
Yeah, thank you for that. And goodness, it is. And it's really difficult to keep my comments here concise because there's a lot that I can say. And I just have to say, first and foremost, like as a woman of color and as somebody who has a lot of lived experience with a lot of issues around exclusive economies, there was once a time I never thought that me or anybody on our team would be able to be in this situation, considering how many barriers there are to do this. And so I'm so excited to see something like the CERF Fund, because while it might seem like it's just about employment, really it's all of the barriers that it takes to really support people on their path to prosperity. And our organization has really the reason I mentioned my colleagues as well is that our organization has gone through a reimagining and a rebirth over the last several years around if United Ways as a whole really want to see things like financial stability and access to education and all of the things that so many of us are doing in our communities, then we have to start with inclusive economies and tackling the racial wealth gap and really asking ourselves what it truly is going to take to get there. And so what brings me such joy and excitement is that we aren't just looking at the project itself as a way to advance equity and access, but we also are looking at it holistically. And so what I mean by that is that, yes, there are components like the social care coordination, and yes, we're creating high roads jobs, so career-based job pathways, but we also are intentional about making sure that we are providing place-based interventions in areas that are predominantly Black and Brown communities, that aren't just areas that are low wealth in our neighborhood, but here in the center of California, we have some of the lowest wealth areas in the nation, and they're hyper concentrated. And over the last several years, we've had community-based organizations that have come from the ground up, very grassroots, and become neighborhood hubs in those areas. And so we could have just said, oh, we're the United Way, we're going to design something that we know might address some gaps. We said, no, we're not going to do to anybody, we're going to do with. And so a vast majority of our grant is going right back out that door. And it's investing in these very CBOs that have been disinvested in, and these communities that have been disinvested in for decades, right? And so we have a lot of work to do, but we really saw equity and inclusion holistically, not just in our service design, but also in how we see ourselves. And so next, we'll share a little bit more about what that looks like for resident engagement, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Corinne, and that's a great bridge actually to the next question. And thank you all just for sharing the intentionality in addressing issues related to equity and inclusion. And I think it's something that folks who are listening can take in and apply as they're moving forward with efforts as well. But one thing I know that all of these programs have in common, they all are community focused, and you're all serving very different communities. And getting their voice in the process is key to its success. So I'd love to hear if you can describe one or two ways in which you're intentionally reaching out and incorporating community voice into your CERF process. And maybe Tanya, we can start with you, and particularly given the context of of the smaller towns that you referenced before?
Certainly happy to share. So our project has been a long time in the making. It depends on who you ask. We might have started working on it as long as 10 years ago, but maybe more in earnest started working on the project about 5 years ago. The project itself came through up to us through the community. This is a combination of program work and this built asset, and the intersection of using a built asset to really transform and catalyze our work. When we first started to conceive of an adaptive reuse plan for the Carnegie Library, it was because the community residents came through their channels to ask for somebody to save this historic landmark. And we started to think about what role we could play in that. And then along the way, through everything from initial feasibility planning to developing the capital, to working alongside many other local nonprofits and elected locals to really come up with a plan that all could embrace. So it's just, this isn't a very concise answer, but it's just years of layered opportunities that have engaged the community's voice in this work, and in a variety of, utilizing lots of different strategies. Community meetings, one-on-one, social media, outreach, cohort groups, etc. And I'm gonna turn this to one of our colleagues here that will have a much more pretty answer to this question.
Tanya, before I leave it, and it is all right that it's not pretty, because this work isn't pretty. This is hard work. If it was easy, I think we all have already accomplished it. So kudos for jumping into that space. But I wanted to ask you this, and I'd add this to the rest of the questions. How are you taking steps in those processes to gain and earn trust? Because I know, particularly in today's climate, that's very difficult in the community work. And again, Sam and Corinne, I'd love for you to be thinking about that as well. And maybe how is that going?
Right. I feel like sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, right? So it's just a long process. We always say this work that we do is long game strategies.
Right.
And so you just keep plodding away at it, and you've got to maintain your integrity. You have to just be real and honest, and be in the community in a place where you interact with those folks who are going to be impacted by the work that you do. So again, it's just a nuanced, layered, long-term strategy.
Thank you, Tanya. Corinne, I'd love to get your perspective on a couple of things you're doing to ensure the community is engaged and maintaining or building or fortifying that trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that we, and I'm realizing that I say we, but I don't just mean United Way. So I'm going to have to divide up my we's here, but we meaning some of our partners that we work very closely with, as well as the organization I serve, the United Way Fresno Madera, have really focused on centering resident voice and resident engagement. And so some of that is in the example I shared, where you have place-based community organizations that are in specific neighborhoods that, like, all we have to do is talk to them and talk to their residents, right? So that's one example. But another example is that one of our partner organizations has launched a community congress, where residents across our county have established what their top priorities are. And they include things like the digital inclusivity or lack thereof, and the need for more digital infrastructure, right, for their own workforce development and access to education, or even as they're going through business accelerator cohorts, which is included in our SERF grant, needing internet for that, right? Or being able to launch at-home businesses and things of that nature. And so they have residents that have already established that as a priority. So it's so easy to make sure that that's a part of a project like this, right? And so what we've really done is we've made sure that along our thinking and along our designing, that we're prioritizing things that residents and our community-based partners who are the closest proximity have flagged and said, like, this is a big gap. And so we're consistently doing asset mapping there. And another thing is that, you know, I'm thinking of like our economic development partner on this project. You know, they also did a series of listening sessions to take a deeper dive in determining like what really are some of the barriers for workforce development, as well as having the same conversations for employers. Because goodness knows that there are employers that are looking for talent and they can tell us what they need in terms of upskilling. So then we're able to determine what is the high roads job need, what jobs do they anticipate, and then what is it that the workforce is saying is their biggest barrier, right? And so then we were able to really look at how to bridge those. And I also wanted to flag something. There was a question in the chat that I wanted to make sure I addressed around board representation that I think is really important. And for our organization, it's especially important because, you know, United Way is actually in Fresno, Madera, although there's a lot of United Ways that are similar. Our United Way is in its 100th year. We're in our centennial year. And we're in a situation where the first time in our organization's history, we have a Black CEO and president, right? And I'm the first, you know, Mexican American and Native vice president at our United Way. And predominantly, we have been led by, you know, a predominantly white privileged board. And that over the last several years, that has changed pretty dramatically. And so now we have the most diversity in our board that we've ever had in our history. I believe that we're a majority BIPOC. I'd have to double check the numbers. I appreciate that question. I just don't have the numbers right in front of me. And I think that like when we talk about it, you know, including resident voice, it needs to come top down as well as, you know, through the community and the neighborhoods we're prioritizing. And I feel like there's no better time for us to engage in this work because we're increasingly positioned to do that. And I feel like I see it happening live.
Thank you, Corinne. I want to be amongst many who love the idea of the community Congress, and I really appreciate you addressing the board and leadership alignment of being able to connect with community voice by also having folks in the leadership that actually match members of the community as well. Again, I think these are all tools for folks for listening to hopefully add to your toolkit as well. Sam, I would love to hear again, a couple of the ideas that you're using to leverage community involvement. I think you even shared a few up front and when you did the description.
Yeah, you know, there've been multiple avenues on this. You know, one that I started mentioning and then I cut myself off before, but you know, was the input of the actual businesses and entrepreneurs in our incubator. So we do have we've got a great set of representation within that group that has gone through our program. 65% of participants have been low income, 65% have been women, 73% have been Black, Indigenous, or people of color. 23% have been LGBTQ, 19% have been disabled. And so we've got a very, you know, we have a lot of voices coming in through the people in the program trying to start businesses, talking about what they need. And, you know, our program has grown and been built up as we've had their input on what stands in the way. And that's why we currently have a kitchen that we offer for, you know, affordable rent. It's influenced what we're doing there. We've also done a lot of meetings, as many as we can, with the surrounding neighborhoods and neighborhood associations, trying to get as much community input as possible on the project. Really coming very early on to talk about our basic concept and what people had concerns about, what they needed. And then I'll just note that, you know, the River District where we are opening this in Sacramento is, sorry, my 4-year-old's trying to break into the room. But it's a neighborhood that has largely not had residents for a long time. It's in a very industrial neighborhood that's going under rapid change. It did have an affordable housing complex for years that was redeveloped and people have just been moving back in. So we have a role actually at that new housing development. We manage the community garden there for the city on site. And so we've been very on the ground for a couple of years there, meeting with residents, attending future resident meetings, and presenting on this and having time for people to come give feedback. That's where we've gotten a lot of excellent. So, we have the, obviously our partners bringing the knowledge about what's needed in the workforce development for people with recent US work authorization. Our entrepreneurs are bringing great knowledge about what they need in order to build their businesses. But then on the community development side, the making a place for this neighborhood where people are welcome and can come and gather. Those meetings with the neighbors and the potential neighbors looking at getting into the affordable housing have been really instrumental. That's where we've heard from people that, hey, this area doesn't have any groceries anywhere. Where are we going to do that? And so on top of the farmers market, we're planning to offer enough grocery staples on the campus to accept EBT for your milk and your rice and some veggies. We had kids who are moving in say like, oh, I can't wait to come and buy snacks, and realizing that our businesses can't. They have to charge a fair amount. They're starting off. They don't have a big capital stack themselves, and so they're trying to stay profitable. But looking at how can we make sure that we can offer discounts for the kids who live in the neighborhood, so this can be a place where they feel welcome and they can come by in the middle of the day and get a snack. So we're looking into the funding sources to get them steep discounts when they come over. So so much of it really is just actually putting ourselves out there, doing brainstorming sessions with neighbors, asking for that level of input.
And Sam, I just wanted to piggyback again. I'm closer to Sacramento. I've seen a lot of the great work you've done. I've seen that you've been in Oak Park and now in the River District. How are you able to gain and maintain trust, given the fact that, in many cases, some of the folks who are on your team maybe don't have the same background as some of the folks that you're serving?
Yeah, absolutely. One is we've been working to better have representation like across our board and staff. But a lot of it, like I'll note in the River District, our staff working at the community garden there have been there to help advocate for residents. Have just it's a new development there. It's a new emerging neighborhood in a lot of ways. There are just issues that there haven't been residents there to complain about before, right? And so helping connect to resources, really taking that seriously. I think a lot of what we have found is that we've been delivering programs since 2004, and those have really worked to consistently incorporate feedback. They're meant to be to provide people a place to link in and get involved themselves. I don't know. I think it just is kind of a record of trust there that our CalFresh at farmers markets has established a reputation. We intentionally do not present all sorts of survey data, or surveys to our customers. Our whole goal is you're a customer at the market. We're just going to treat you with dignity, and we're not going to have you be a guinea pig or a data source for, this is just something that you have a right to without, need to. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback on that. People have expressed appreciation. Sorry, that was an inelegant mingling there, but.
No, I think that's really, really good tips. And again, I can attest to having seen your work and seeing the vast diversity of folks who participate and are champions for Alchemist. You're definitely backing it up with that consistency. Really, really good information from all three panelists. There's been lots of really good information shared in terms of the progress that we've made, but again, this is hard work. And so I really would like you to share some of the bumps in the road that you may have faced, whether it be with partnerships or with processes. Moving this forward, what are some of the challenges that you either are trying to overcome or are still having issues getting over? And maybe Corinne, we could start with you.
Absolutely. I think that, very logistically, the challenge of the pace right? Like we've really proposed a comprehensive project and we designed our work plan to be reflected in 2 years, which was an option, but even that is going to go by quickly. And so, being able to not just ramp up, but also with replicability and scalability in mind, make sure that we're a fish out of water, kind of examining the water as we implement and execute is really mission critical. And so the things that are weighing on me are not just the ramp up period there, but also the ability to have strong measurement and evaluation in place, because we are wholeheartedly committed to expanding, replicating, and scaling. Because while we're focused on certain communities and while we're focused on the digital model demonstration and we're focused on social care coordination across all 4 counties, the truth is, like, I'll pick on the digital piece, that's one demonstration site to show how it's possible to develop in disinvested communities, even when it's not initially profitable for internet service providers. And so the whole point of that is to be able to replicate it. And so making sure we can do it and then recreate that magic in like 24 months or less is a tall order, right? And I think the other thing is that it's so easy to get going and then just get fixated on grant deliverables. But, the questions that you're asking, Jose, that I deeply appreciate around centering residents and continuously building trust. Like, we know, I don't care how well a project is designed, I don't care how long you've looked at it, there are bumps in the road that happen, sometimes through things that are even outside of your control, sometimes change in policy, change in who knows what. And so that trust becomes very fragile, not just among residents, but also, like I mentioned, a lot of our funding is going right back out to the door. And a lot of these organizations we're investing in, we've been like partners in the periphery, but like some of them, this funding is a huge accelerant. So we want to get it right so we don't accidentally damage any trust. We want to build on the momentum, and that we know that CERF is really, this is like the first pilot implementation grant of hopefully many. And so I think getting that and getting it done with fidelity and integrity, I think those are the things that are really, I almost hesitate to call them a challenge, but the things that we're mindful of, because we welcome that challenge, we're just being really sensitive about it.
Thank you, Corrine. I don't know, the way in which you're breaking this down, we may have to put this on YouTube for sure. I think there's a lot of folks who can gain from that. Sam, would love to hear what challenges that you're facing as a part of the process.
Yeah, one challenge immediately came to mind for me, and it's tied partly to this being a construction project in our instance. But this is a major capital project. It's amazing to have this funding awarded and coming, but there is the issue of what is the bridge funding? As a nonprofit, if we're building something out for millions of dollars, how do we have that funding on hand, that liquidity to actually get the process moving, to get deposits in, to get contractors paid? CERF is pretty incredible, I think, in that it does have an advance payment where many state programs do not. And I believe that's pegged at about a quarter maximum. At the same time, with state policies that are beyond this program in particular, once that advance is used up, you kind of have to use that up before you can start reimbursing. And so it does help at first, but you're going to be hit then again with where's the liquidity that we pay out while we wait 90 days to be reimbursed by the state, in a realistic timeline. And so we've been trying to figure that out. We're trying to look at what the best options are, because with interest rates where they're at right now, that adds a lot to the project cost. And state funding can't be used to pay back interest on a loan or that sort of thing. So it's not about CERF in particular. It's more about some of the ways that state policy sets this up. We found great desire to help on the state side, but there are burdens there. Sometimes programs feel like this would make more sense for a county or a city where they would maybe have the cash on hand and get those reimbursements. So I think to me that's an issue for us right now. In the third phase of CERF, where there are a lot more of these projects, I think that's going to be an obstacle popping up all over the place for people. How exactly they get there.
I appreciate that honesty, Sam, and I guess I would just add to it, again, being a fellow Sacramento resident, it's hard to articulate to a lot of the funders that when they see the tag of the big victory, that there still is a need for that bridge support in the nonprofit space. I really appreciate you articulating all of those challenges that you've referenced. So thank you. Tanya, I would love to hear your perspective of maybe some of the challenges or barriers that you're facing.
Definitely. And I also echo everything that Sam just said, because our project too is a construction project. And so really having the ability to cash flow this project is going to be a challenge for us. And we'll, I don't know if Sam, if you guys are using new market tax credits in your capital stack, but we intend to. And by using the tax credits, we also have to have demonstrated cash on day one, as opposed to drawdowns over time. So, but I believe we'll be able to overcome it. I haven't figured it quite out yet, but I know there's an answer. There's a solution to this. So we've been at this a long time, and our early challenge was really just the, capacity and again, resources to do the pre-development work. And I think that, I'll share with anybody who's listening who wants to work on a construction project, just knowing getting it ready for investment is a heavy lift. It takes twice as long as you think it's going to take, and it costs twice as much as you think it's going to cost. And then, learning that even though we have a fully articulated plan for construction, there's things that we don't have yet quite, and so it just continues to go on. Partnerships have been really the key to everything we've done, because that capacity issue can only be answered for us by collaborations and partnerships. And so one of the things I'm particularly proud of is that we are really good at helping each other out in Siskiyou County. And more recently, we've, our work is, as I mentioned previously, is starting to expand our boundaries. And so we have a whole new set of collaborators and friends in our neighboring counties that just support us every day. And we try to return that favor.
Thank you, Tanya. Again, I appreciate the honesty and transparency, and even more so, I appreciate the optimism and then the proof of that in just the consistency of your group to be able to move it forward and expand and get more partners into the fold. A lot of times people look at obstacles as barriers. It looks like you're looking at obstacles as opportunities, and that's a really great approach. So we're gonna go into our last question for the panelists. And again, I want to thank you all just for one, your leadership, and two, just your honesty and transparency, really providing participants with a lot of really good information. Our last question really is just, is there any advice, final words of advice that you'd like to share with folks listening who are moving forward and looking to participate in CERF projects, and that they might be able to apply on a day-to-day basis over the next few years? I'll start off with Sam.
Great question. Yeah, I think on my end, I mean, I know that the Capital Region has a lot of great projects in the works. There are already a lot of great things out there to be further developed. I know one issue that we always see here is that funding often trails by a couple of years from where the planning and where the budgeting was. I remember SMUD's Museum of Science and Curiosity was chasing that tail forever. Always got the funding it needed 2 years ago, and prices had gone up until finally managed to pin it down. So I think there's a need for when something is at the right time to make sure we get either plan far enough ahead in the budgeting, or to have that sense of urgency to help things move forward at the right time when they can actually be delivered. And then I think one thing I'll just note is there are, like I said, there are so many great projects in the region in development that have been in development for some time. There are great new ideas being spawned too. And I think being able to separate those that have like that deep commitment in the community from I don't know of any like this, but it seems like there are always going to be things that are chasing a funding opportunity. I think that'll be a key thing for the region to help sort out is, and that doesn't mean not a new project, because there are new projects that are rooted in great community work and what is already known. But I just think, there's that will be the tough thing, I think, is to figure out like where this is really going to be building in a way that that grows the impact and really delivers what SERF is meant to do for the state and for the region.
Great advice, Sam. Tanya, any advice again for the Capital Regional Collaborative as we move forward that folks might be able to take away?
I think from my perspective, I would just say, embrace a stick-to-itness attitude. Like, just know that this is a long-term strategy and we've got a lot of work to do. And it's a heavy load to carry. So just keep plugging away at it. And also don't be afraid to ask. Like, that was one of the things when we could start actually verbalizing and communicating well what we wanted to do, people got really excited about it. And that was actually harder than that sounds, to be able to really communicate well what you want to do. I think really that's all I would offer. Just it stick with it.
Tanya, that's great advice. I think it resonates with me, and I'm sure it resonates with many others. Corrine, I'm going to give you the last word on this question, and I'm going to ask one other question. I'm going to take a little bit of privilege as the moderator to ask you guys one more quick speed round question, but Corrine, on this one.
Okay, so this isn't the speed round, but we'll make it quick to make room for the speed round. So I certainly echo the sentiments and what Sam and Tanya have said 100%. And the cash flow really hits me hard, and is something that, we're kind of taking that onus and responsibility on for our CBOs that are in the project that wouldn't have been able to have been a SERF partner for the very project that we were awarded, right? And so we had to think differently about that. The other thing is that we had a lot of projects in mind for this, but in including the community, what we ended up submitting in a pretty fast and furious, 2-week turnaround there was supplemental and building on work that was either queued up or a twinkle in someone's eye and fulfilling a real gap in need that like hadn't gotten started yet. And so the reason I mention that is because not only did it cement partnerships that we knew we all, the community needed and just didn't have yet, but it also allowed us to leverage supplemental investments, right? And so we coupled, this work with something like the Good Jobs, the Economic Development Agents Administration. Sorry, I might be getting that acronym wrong. They had invested in some Good Jobs funding throughout the state. One of our partners got that. And so then we were able to align our upskilling and workforce to supplement that grant. So thinking of different ways to match and leverage and build, I think is huge, especially because then it prevents us from having bifurcated services, and it allows us to pool our resources together and go deeper than we would have been able to have if we just designed a standalone project. And so that's really the guidance that I would say, especially because the whole notion of an inclusive economy through a community economic resiliency fund is really centering, in my mind, community solutions to start with. So that would be the biggest piece, is how you can leverage and build on existing efforts.
Thanks, Corrine. So I guess my last question is, again, we've been talking about economic resilience. We've been talking about inclusive economic development. We've been talking about equity. We've been talking about lots of terms that are, a lot of us are doing work in the space, but outside of this room, a lot of folks might still be confused. In I guess a couple of sentences or in a couple of minutes, what would you do and what would you say to explain why this is such an important topic for the communities that you serve. And Sam, I'll start with you.
I think, it's almost like something was going on in the chat here. We were talking about there that, the need for inclusive economic development. If we don't center inclusivity from the start, then economic development always ends up continuing the divides. It continues to accumulate among those who are already accumulating more, have more of the resources to begin with. It's so hard to capture any of that growth. We see that in the gentrification displacement of neighborhoods where improvements come in and the people who've lived there a long time are displaced and don't get those benefits. There are ways we can address that by securing housing and so many things we can do. But if we don't do that intentionally, then improvements and developments don't end up benefiting people who need them most. And I think I think we just from the core, we need this work that is targeting and empowering people who have so many great talents and skills, so much to contribute, but are just cut off from the resources, and providing a chance for everyone to actually have the chance to flourish. So that's.
Thank you, Sam. Tanya, why is this such important work for the community you serve in Siskiyou County and the surrounding area?
So what comes to my mind is some feedback that we received from one of our funding agencies in our work, who was, I think, a little bit surprised for a rural community to present such an optimistic project. And they were really impressed with our project and said, one thing that we really felt about your work is that the investment we make will be so impactful at your community level. In communities who have not benefited from the investment of resources over time. And so, we really believe that this work is going to be very transformative and impactful. And we're just really appreciative of the opportunities.
Thank you, Tanya. Corinne, I'm gonna give you the last word. Why are all these things we're talking about more than buzzwords? Why is it so important?
Yeah, and certainly I absolutely, I was like cheering for Tanya and Sam. I agree with what you had to say. One of my favorite things about the RFP that the state had coined was the term disinvestment to describe prioritizing community economic resiliency. And the reason why that word really struck me was that it's active, and it also is putting the onus on the systems and the systemic design. Systems work exactly as they should. And so it's so easy for us, or people, to your note, Jose, that might still be confused about why this is important, to complain about all of the symptoms. And yet we know that, as Sam had said, people don't all start with the same level of access and opportunity and privilege, and things just kind of keep moving if we don't pause and really think about inclusivity and equity. And it's easy for us to complain about, things like poverty and things like, even blight in neighborhoods or air pollution. I'm in a valley that has one of the worst air pollution in the state of California. And it's easy to fuss about those things, but until we recognize that neighborhoods have been disinvested in and people have been disinvested in, and that our systems aren't as inclusive as maybe we intend them to be for individuals and families to truly thrive, then we're just going to be spinning our wheels, having the same issues different day. And the first step is not just awareness, but also having an honest plan and piloting what you want to do to see how you can instigate change. And so that's why for me, one of the challenges, I think, and one of the opportunities is really around like measurement and evaluation, because it's on all of us to, we've all designed a dose. We've all said, this is what we think is going to begin to tackle and increase inclusivity for our communities. But the truth is, we need to be aware of what dose we give, how much we give, what that looks like, how it was designed, what are the ingredients, does anybody have any allergies? Like, we have to think about our work in that way. And doing that in 12 to 24 months as we worry about the very real challenges of cash flow and partner trust. And, it's real. And so, but that's also why it is so mission critical, because otherwise we're really not going to see the transformation that we hope to. And so it really is something, this work is really something that impacts every single human being in every single one of our communities, even those with privilege that think that people that are low wealth or in a concentrated neighborhood that might be far away from theirs, it absolutely impacts them.
Well, I have to say, I get to moderate panels often. It's not often that I have a panel that's this talented and this committed and providing so much valuable information. Sam, Tanya, Corrine, thank you so much for your leadership. It's proof that the CERF selected 3 great projects that are going to have a tremendous impact. Again, as the Capital Region continues its journey, people are going to take the information they learn from this call to improve upon those opportunities. So again, I just want to thank you all for taking the time, the leadership, battling through the barriers to make sure that, again, inclusivity, equity is a part of our economic development journey in the Capital Region. And again, I want to thank Valley Vision for the opportunity to moderate the conversation. And with that, I'll pass it back to Evan, who's going to provide some additional content moving forward and bring Brookings to the table as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to our panel, to Jose. I have to really ditto Jose's words that was such a talented group of people, obviously really passionate group of people, and some amazing projects that they're advancing. And I really appreciate the depth of the conversation. This is not easy work. It's not simple work by any means. And so it requires those transparent and in-depth conversations to really get to the nitty-gritty of what this is all about. And they certainly did that. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today and your thoughts and insights. So the projects that our panelists were talking about are the early projects. They're the ones that got picked up by the CERF program in their pilot phase at the very beginning. And what it's our job now to build a whole pipeline of those types of projects and to look at the entire landscape of our region and start to figure out what are those big opportunities for us and how are we going to seize those, develop those, and really kind of develop our whole big platform for inclusive economic change and growth in our region. And to do that, it takes a lot of different types of inputs, right? So it is that community engagement, that community voice really working from the ground up. It's also and I thought Corrine did a great job of talking about kind of the metrics and the evaluation. It's kind of understanding the universe that we're living in, where's their opportunity, and what do those different conditions, demographics, economic conditions, what do those look like in our region, and how do we use that information to help guide us and to help understand where we really can build inclusive opportunity and build more equity into our system. And I'm really proud and happy that we have a great research partner that is helping us do this. So here in a second, I'm going to introduce Merrick, but I also want to kind of contextualize the relationship we've had with Brookings in our region over the last few years. And that is, is a really important data partner that has, starting back in 2017, really helped us dive into where some of the opportunities in our region, what do we see around some of our key clusters of economic opportunity, and where are some real inequities and disparities that we know that we have to work on. So that was an economic assessment that Brookings did for us a few years ago. And the CERF opportunity gives us a renewed opportunity to go back to Brookings and do deeper work and really look at a new set of data that's really responsive to the needs of the CERF program, and that's really going to help us provide that platform to move forward and give us some real information to take back to the community and back to our sub-regional tables and our local communities to think about where we want to go from here. So with that, I am going to introduce Merrick Gutman. He's a senior fellow from Brookings. He's very familiar with our region. He's here with his team, Rachel Barker and Jessica Lee, to help us really start to think about the data and the research component of the CERF program. And Merrick, I'll turn it over to you to talk about what that looks like.
Thanks very much. You can move the next slide because I do not want to look at how much younger I seemed than now. So, yeah, we've been excited to partner again with the Capital Region based off work really early in our pilot activities around comprehensive regional inclusive economic initiatives. And it may be helpful to know we've been working across the state on some of these activities, including Fresno Drive, Inland Empire, Stanislaus 2030, things that you may have heard about that predated CERF and nationally. And what we're trying to do through the CERF process is engage with a number of places so that we can continue to learn and refine what we know about how to look at these challenges and then convert applied analysis, both quantitative and qualitative, integrated with community expertise and exchange into real strategies, tactics, activation plans, so we get more of those kinds of funded projects you just heard about. And we have lots of different examples of how that's been happening, but I'm going to focus with two objectives right now. The first is that we want to kind of build on your last meeting and discussion with Manuel Pastor to show principles, approach, challenges about collecting information that better enables community and diverse stakeholder decision-making. So we could talk about the philosophy of this and how we're approaching it, consistent with CERF, and this discovery research phase should advance a few more goals beyond, oh, that's interesting data. It needs to have a two-way exchange of information and expertise so that everyone, no matter what perspective they're coming from, gets some shared terms and objectives to use and a baseline for that decision-making that's informed. And that means also helping through the discovery process and research to identify how both civic and community stakeholders who haven't been deeply engaged in traditional economic development are able to understand that perspective, and for traditional economic development actors and workforce development actors to better understand civic and community where that has not been sufficiently represented, particularly in issues of selection and program design. So we also want to make certain that it's easy to look at data points and do some qualitative outreach, but the process of community engagement needs to direct the things that we want to explore. And we have to find new creative ways, whether it's through data or qualitative activities, in order to uncover the real evidence that helps people make decisions. So it's a two-way exchange and discovery that we want to really pursue. Second, I'll be talking about walking through a couple early building blocks of information to show you how we're starting to blend these objectives and get to focus on limited time and resources so that quality jobs and access to them are the decision factors or what drives choices as you move into strategy, tactics, and implementation. So there's a lot to jam into a short period, might not get through everything, but I'm going to try very, very, very hard. First, this is just an outline of the two activities that are part of the intro discovery phase before transitioning into strategies. There's, as you probably are aware, there's a sort of now, I guess, project status report that's due at the end of next month. And it's going to present to the state. It's an internal report to the state, but it will be used for sharing out and the actual engagement, community engagement, and discovery process. That's going to include pieces of how the work plan fits to get to some of those data points and how it's going to be used for that interchange. Some of the issues that we identified early on, there to be struggles to figure out because of information availability or just complexity. And then really that's a checkpoint so that the state also can see where there are commonalities of challenge across regions, and hopefully provide some support, or we can all work together across regions to identify where we can fill in gaps for each other and learn from each other through the discovery activities. That output at the end of December is going to be the transition to strategic choices about where you're going to focus work group activities and so on. And it's going to include the economy, talent, industry clusters, and a blend with climate and public health. Next slide, please. So a lot of different factors incorporated, including things beyond what the state has required, especially in questions about barriers to access, childcare issues, a deeper dive into entrepreneurship questions, and so on. Things that are really important that haven't been identified by the state as needing to incorporate. So just a couple of principal points here. This was also reflected in the work that was originally done with the region for the prosperity plan basis. But really, we're trying to look at the economy side of this in 3 dimensions. Most often, everybody thinks economic development, that means growth, that's job counts, that's capital expenditures. But through the past 6-7 years of trying to get better outcomes for the economy and people who live and work in it, these other dimensions are all going to be factored in explicitly, and I think this is very consistent with where CERF is. So yes, you need growth, but you can have growth without inclusion. You also can have growth that doesn't create high quality jobs. And you can have growth with high quality jobs that isn't accessible or evenly, equitably distributed for opportunity to residents who are, as just described in the previous panel, they've been excluded from opportunities, some demographics more than others. So this blend of growth, prosperity, productivity, and inclusion is the mix that you want to see if you have a successful economy that's working for people who live in it and the firms that are creating jobs. Again, that point is, I said you can have growth without inclusion, but the other factor is you cannot have inclusion without greater growth. It's the kind of growth and the kind of things you're focusing your limited time and money on versus low quality jobs that are big job counts is an important factor here. So the balance between creating more quality jobs that are absent and creating problems for inclusion and making sure access is part of that is a blend that we're trying to mix through the analysis and discovery phase. Next slide, please. We're organizing this activity around a couple of different areas that really influence the economy and also incorporate specifically callouts from the state around CERF. So the focus, there's going to be a ton of information and it's all going to be publicly available through interactives and outward facing. So there's more information that would be incorporated into final interpretations, but everybody's going to have broad, easy access through a public online data tool to explore all of these areas and make your own decisions also, but in depth by topic and by geography. So we're focusing on traded sectors, which are those that generate income from outside of the region and create higher quality jobs and generate more opportunity, and focused on entrepreneurship, not necessarily the traded sectors, but high growth wealth building activities that enable people to get ahead. We're looking at other parts of the economy as well, but those are the ones that are going to drive the greatest potential for changing the direction and offering up middle scale, middle income jobs that are able to help people to have economic mobility. The second category is all sorts of questions around talent, including understanding what talent exists in the region and how it might transfer over to other sector opportunities. The third, and what's being generated by talent providers and how well that aligns with the opportunities that are available for good, promising jobs within the region. And then the third one is about innovation. So what are we really good at that's going to be able to transfer into more quality job creation that fits the trade sectors and entrepreneurship options? Enablers include things of infrastructure and governance, how we all work together or don't work together, fragmentation. And then the CERF specific considerations added on to that are about climate and environmental impacts, both as an economic opportunity, but also as a factor in deciding what of these options are available should not be on the table or prioritized because of their climate or environmental impacts. And then also factors around public health. Next slide, please. So we're piecing all these things together in information so people can consider this is not this, you don't have to follow this, but it's a good way to think about winnowing down from identifying things that are options to things that are about making choices among the options that are available to us. And that includes all of those dimensions around, gee, what kinds of businesses and sectors and subsectors make sense based on what we can do well here or where we can move to from emerging areas. What kinds of policy environments are helping to drive those opportunities? What's our talent base and so on? And then we're going to show you how we're able to factor in this question about job quality as a core to making those decisions, then hitting some of these other things where it becomes, here's a set of things that maybe make sense for this region, and you all and the community interest stakeholders can decide on what fits the most value and preferences for those opportunities. Next slide. So one of the factors here that we just started on and just lay out for you all is how we break down the presentation deck will be available. Although I'm going to have a caveat onto this, and it's hard to read, I know. So it just looks like it's fantastic, right? So trust me, when you're able to see the details, it'll be even better. So one of the things that's really a challenge is that the region, piecing this region together as the capital region, sometimes these things fit together, and sometimes the counties are not necessarily considering themselves, or the metro areas aren't considering themselves part of the same economy. So we took a look, including on the tables that have already been set for engagement, at how everything fits together and what level of information we should be gathering up that would be useful, applicable for sub-regional activities, and then to building the case for things that can be done fully across the region. So I'm just showing this to you to say that these are the categories at level of detail that we're going to be producing consistently at the county scale to reflect commonalities and differences among them. So we've looked at size, the common industry mixes, occupational mixes, the relationship and workforce worksheds, and this seemed to be the best way to break down information and present it. But there's other ways, and we do this obviously also at the capital region scale. So there are other ways to organize it, but as a principle, this is how we're organizing information going forward. Next slide. So I'm going to just briefly run through this, and this is probably worth a whole conversation, but these are some of the issues we've seen nationwide in grappling with these kinds of initiatives that present themselves both in discovery and strategy phases. And we try to think about how do we proactively deal with this through discovery activities, both the community engagement and the information and exploration that we're doing. We're collecting information, we're collecting exploration that we're doing. So I'm just going to really briefly tag through these so you have them in your mind, and we need to struggle with you all on how to address these most effectively through the CERF process and with the region as its organs and the diversity of stakeholders that are coming into this mix. So the first one is at what scale, and I kind of mentioned that before. How much of this activities are real localized? There's comments about how neighborhoods are benefited from these activities versus what it operates at a higher level. So neighborhoods, economy doesn't operate within a neighborhood. Neighborhoods are connected into the economy that functions in some certain areas because of workforce sharing and assets and transportation and the kinds of businesses that are there. So we have to strike a balance and understanding with one another about where it is, at what level is we're grappling with topics and opportunities. Second is, and this is always comes out a little wrong, so I don't mean it probably in the way that that I say it, if it comes off as grating to you. But there's we have to be through this discovery phase thinking about pushing the agenda and aspirations for what we can accomplish. But we can't go all the way to wishful thinking and imagine that we're going to be the next insert X place. So everything has to be built on, and I think this was mentioned in the previous panel, the DNA and the assets that we have and what we can reasonably accomplish. So we got to think within certain boundaries, but those boundaries can be pretty expansive and aspirational. And that data and the evidence we're creating should help us to draw that line. There's the demand side and supply side issues. So demand side being quality job creation, and supply side being how to help people through talent, training, childcare, transportation, other enablers to get into jobs. And a lot of emphasis is placed on some conflict between these two, but we've seen before the availability of quality jobs in a region is always too low. So we have to have a balance in creating more of those opportunities alongside enabling people to have access to them. And a lot of the emphasis tends to go on the program side versus the job creation side. There are a lot of different ways to get to job quality. There's job creation, there's worker empowerment so that there's more balance in existing jobs and improving the quality of existing jobs between the workers and employers. There is policy like regulations and earned income tax credits. And then there's reducing the costs that are in the region, like how much housing costs, in order to make existing jobs better quality. These are not conflicting, they're just different routes. And so a lot of our emphasis is going to be on how do we create and access more jobs, but we're taking into account those other factors as well. And then this the typical things about you got to prioritize or else nothing gets done. And we need better alignment between economic and workforce objectives and measures. And then what's the role of community throughout this process from idea generation and endorsement to where it really we find most impact is around program design and the tactical implementation. So it's relevant to people who are being helped. So not just what is the idea, but how it's really being delivered. Next slide. So I have a few minutes left here and to go through some of the building blocks that I mentioned and just give you a picture of the level of data that we're collecting. And then maybe if there are questions, I'll try to go really fast so we can check in. There's going to be a lot more of this. This is just a preview, and there's a big draft subject to revision on the top side. And some of our colleagues in Valley Vision and others have not even seen some of this information yet. So it's a preview, but it gives you a sense about how we're approaching some of those factors around opportunity jobs and job quality. First is, you all have seen living wage indices before. United Way has one, previously presented, it's used a lot in California. What we've done is we pieced together not just a zero sum at the end of the month. You paid for your food, you paid for your house, and you've got nothing left. We've incorporated in here emergency savings and then wealth building savings for whether you want to buy a house or start a business or send your kids to school with less debt, all of those factors, or retire. So we've incorporated those factors into this and done about 30 different cuts to describe different ways that be more accurate about the populations in the regions and how much it costs based upon different family compositions, because there's a wide range of family compositions in this region and across California. So we're a little bit more accurate, we think, in determining what it costs in order to transfer that into a quality job. Next slide. From that analysis, there's a high level, and some of this is unassigned, but this region as a whole actually is really well positioned for the proportion of families that are not struggling to make ends meet and get ahead. So it may not feel that way, but usually that big gray splotch is around 45 to 50%. And that orange category about families that are working but still struggling to get ahead, not just get by, is a much larger proportion. So that's the overview of the region. Next slide. But this widely variable by sub-regional areas. So we're able to break that down, and just we'll share again this out if we confirm it, but is a wide variation in terms of what the economy is producing and making available for workers and their ability to support families and get ahead. Next slide, please. This is then what's the level of impact by subregions and regions on kids versus adults. Next slide. And then this helps us, if you get the next one, this helps us also to blend over to the workforce factors and the distribution. Okay, keep going. And the distribution of jobs by area, by race, gender, age, and educational levels. And we again parse this out by within the region and within different categories. Next slide. These kinds of factors, including this is a share, so it's not just within a particular race or educational attainment level are you able to get ahead, but this is the share of the overall population and the ability to do that. So we're able, next slide, we're able to start building profiles and fit that into, this is an example, what is the quality job gap that needs to be closed in order to hit a policy preference of reducing the number of working families that can't get ahead by a certain proportion. And that helps us, next slide, to figure out where the opportunity lies within sectors and subsectors, so you can make better choices that align with. This is by promising jobs that gets you into a good job within 10 years, and a good job that meets all those standards for being able to get ahead. Also is broken down by skill levels within industry sectors and subsectors. Next slide. So these kinds of profiles can align with where opportunities are in the economy overall by sectors and subsectors, so we can make better choices. Next slide. This is a map of the overall region and where sectors or strengths are. And this is a profile of areas in the traded sector versus generally where this region is ahead of, equal to, or lagging the equal industry mix in California versus nationwide. The bottom one is in traded sectors. So those reddish things are areas where there's actually, we're not doing as well as we could be or should be if we were as productive as the rest of the country. I'm going to take that down now. So that is like a picture, a very early picture about the kind of information we're producing on the economy side. And we're going to have similar things and interpretations across all those categories on talent, innovation, entrepreneurship, and the barriers that people face in order to access better quality jobs. Evan, do we have any time for me to answer questions, or you just want to go?
I think we might have a couple minutes for questions. So if anybody has a question for Merrick, go ahead and put it in the chat. And, in the meantime, that was a great presentation. Thanks for bringing us through that. And one thing I might ask, first of all, it was fun to see just your very quick snapshot of data that you're starting to collect. How do you think, kind of as our advisors and as a researcher, how do we make that accessible to people in our region? So as we're thinking about the local tables that we're going to put together and the ways we're going to be trying to make decisions, what are some of the things we want to think about using that data?
Yeah, that's great. So for one thing, it's too much information, and it's got to be turned into a relatively straightforward narrative. And so that's what we're working on. We're having an outward facing websites already being built, or data tool that you can access, and people can go through and see what looks like, what their interest areas are over time, by topic, by geography. So that's being built as we go. But I think that it's really important to, I just showed you, here's the building blocks. We have to be able to do in one page an explanation in very straightforward terms. Here's what this means and why there might be a problem or an opportunity that's in the economy, so that everybody can see what it is and what the rationale is for that interpretation. And we have to be also accessible to get pushback on that. It's like, I don't believe you. And that's actually, numbers only tell you so much. So a lot of this is about following up for validation, qualitative input from a whole swath of people, from the public sector, from the community, from the business side, universities. So that's going to be validating. We have a researcher roundtable group we put together to help with like assuring that some of these interpretations are ground truth. But we need to make sure that we're open to direction on things that these raise questions about. Is this really meaningful, or does what you say really mean that? And then we can go down that, not necessarily even in the next 5 months before the December target for turning over, but in the strategy phase, there's undoubtedly going to be a lot more questions raised about how do I convert this into a tactic or response, or should this be a priority or not? So I think that it's just an evolution. It's not a dump of a report. That's the key thing. So we want as much exchange in simple presentations, which I did not necessarily accomplish today, to as many people as possible to get that feedback.
Great. Well, appreciate that. Really appreciate your walking us through this as we kind of are really just in the early process of starting to sort through our data and think about how we're going to bring that into our coalition, into our community partner network, and into communities to make decisions and start to bring priorities together. I do see someone's got their hand raised. I don't know how to bring somebody on to audio.
I just did. Hopefully, Elijah, are you able to say your question? I think you're on mute. Let me.
So there's a question particularly struck by the slide as to where the report shows those who are ready to move ahead versus those who are still struggling more. Where does CERF fall into who it should service? That's a question.
It is, and I think that's going to queue up kind of the next portion of our presentation here. Elijah, I'm sorry we're not able to get to you. If you do have a question that you want to put in the chat, please do, and we'll make sure that we follow up with it. But Merrick, thank you so much. Really looking forward to continuing to work with you, have you reporting back, and kind of starting to really put these data components together to help inform the work that we're all doing.
Great, thanks.
Thanks so much. All right, if we can, let's bring our slides back up. And to segue right into, I think Richard's point is that, I mean, to speak to, I think some of Richard's point is to bring up this fact that, you know, the numbers and the data, that is a point of information for us. It's really important. But it's also really important to understand our human networks, our capacities, the people who are already out doing the work. What are the assets and what are the challenges that exist along the human capital of our region? And it's really important that we hear from you all in order to start to understand that and start to add that to kind of the universe of things we know about how we can move projects and ideas and move this coalition forward. And for that reason, we've created a survey, and we would really like to have you all respond to this survey. It is a stakeholder network mapping activity. So we really want to understand who is in the network. We want to get our survey out far and wide, starting with our coalition, but even beyond that, in order to kind of really focus on that community voice and understand the capacity and the organizational strengths that we have here in the region that we can build on. This is all, you know, in addition to the data, this is all things we'll bring back to you. So as we're all doing the work together, as we're coming together at our planning tables, this is the information that we'll bring back and that we'll be sharing with everybody. So really important that people respond to this survey. I really hope you will, for a few different reasons. I see that Alana put the link in the chat. There's also the QR code here that you can put on your phone, like you're taking a picture, and then it'll bring that link up. But first of all, it's so important because we need to hear from you, and we need to understand the network that we're existing in, and really start to build up our idea of that human capacity that we have in the region. The other reason that it's important is because I have a bet out there that we're going to get to like 100% response rate from our coalition members. So it's really important to me personally that that we hit a really high number, because you know, I don't want to throw the team under the bus, but some people thought, you know, surveys, you don't always get a high response. We have to be prepared for that. And I said, no, we have a coalition that is going to respond to this survey. So please do, and we'll follow up with emails and we'll continue to communicate about it. We're hoping to get all of our responses in by August 10th. It's not an incredibly burdensome survey. It's relatively short, and I think we're going to get a lot of rich information out of it that we can feed back to all of our community partners as we're moving forward in this work. So please fill out that survey. Next slide, please. All right, I want to give you an update around what else we have going on. So first of all, we're doing these meetings monthly, these collaborative meetings. They're virtual because we know that we have a large, vast 8-county region, and it would be difficult to get everybody together in a room. So we're going to settle with these virtual meetings, but the focus for this summer is really about getting us all on the same page around inclusive economic development. So for our June meeting, we talked about how do we define inclusive economic development. We looked at some of our demographics, and we really worked with Manuel Pastor to think about what does that look like? How do we build prosperity around our diverse region through this program. So this month, as you just saw through our panel, we looked at actual projects on the ground that have been funded and that are consistent with the goals and the values of the CERF program to help us start thinking about in a grounded way, how do we want to build programs and priorities and projects. And next month, I think we're going to be focused on the low carbon economy piece. So really thinking about what does that mean? What does it look like for our region? And how do we really lean into that? So I really hope you'll attend and that we'll continue to learn together and continue to kind of set this framework together. And we also record everything. We post it on our website. We share the slides. So we're building kind of our library together of these resources that we can continue to draw from as we do the work together. So when we think about what's coming up in the upcoming months, there's a lot. So you've just heard from Merrick talking about research and analysis. We have some products that are due to the state later this fall, and then again at the end of the year. So we're going to be working towards getting that analysis done and then getting that out to you all and kind of out on the street to talk about. We're bringing in support and partners around communications. So we had released an RFP, a request for proposal back in June, and we're in process of bringing a partner on who can really help us think through messaging that is accessible to everyone. How are we really telling the story in our region around the vision that we have for inclusive economic development, and how do we make that accessible to everybody? So that includes a website, web support, translation, and other kind of accessible communication assets that we're going to be developing through this process. Another RFP that was out in the world in the last month was the sub-regional community hubs. So we're bringing in contracted partners to be local hubs across the region. So we had 5 different sub areas that we identified, and we're bringing those partners on board to really anchor the process in those localized regions. So that's going to be a place where we'll be bringing people together to really start talking about grappling with the data, talking about how we want to engage communities, and starting to think about and prioritize different projects for each local area. And then as we think about, as we start to kind of go from the ground up and develop our sense of priority projects, we also want to make sure we have a full regional lens, right? Because we don't want 5 different regional plans. We want one full regional plan where we can have a really comprehensive sense of what it is we're trying to create. And for that purpose, this fall, we're going to be creating the Leadership Council. This will be kind of cultivated from champions coming up from these sub-regional committees, and then help provide this body who oversees the whole body of regional work and helps us put it all together in a really cohesive way. So that is the work that is still to come. We're really excited about it, and we'll continue to not only be communicating to you about it, but really we're going to start to see a shift in the next month where we're bringing people together for more kind of hands-on meetings to really be doing this work together in a very interactive way. I want to thank the Valley Vision and Valley Vision affiliated team who's put this together today and who's working hard across all of these different topical areas. to keep this project moving. We have a new member of our team, Maritessa Bravo Ares, who has come in as a project leader for the CERF program, and you're going to be seeing more of her and hearing more from her. So very excited about that. We have our team, Alana Ramsey, Darlene Meza, and our Community Strong Strategies team of Richard Dana, Bill Reyes, and Christina Craner. So I want to thank everybody who's helped put all these pieces together. And of course, I want to thank our speakers and panelists who have also supported the day today. And as we start to wrap up, one thing I want to really note, this is a project of regional importance. This is, I think, really working together to create a framework for inclusive economic development is a culture change. It means doing things differently than what we've done before. And it really means finding partners, champions, from all levels of our communities, including our key decision makers, our key policy makers. So it's important that all of these folks are a part of this vision, are crafting this vision with us, and are kind of walking alongside as we're doing this. And as you all know, we have a really diverse 8-county region. And so we're finding leaders from across our 8 counties who are helping support the work. And I'm really happy to here in a second to turn over some closing remarks to Placer County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Suzanne Jones from District 4. Supervisor Jones brings a wealth of experience and wisdom to this region, including from professional experience and travels from all around the world before she came into Placer County. But in Placer County, she's demonstrated a really long-term commitment to education and to creating opportunity for all. So Suzanne, I'd like to welcome you to say a few words as we close out our program today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for participating. This is a great opportunity. And I would just like to say that regional cooperation is essential to address sustainability issues. Placer County is a microcosm of our CERF region. Starting with our Tahoe concerns, they tend to be housing related, tourist impacts, and forestry. Climate change is certainly of concern when considering forestry and resilience. Then in the center of our Placer County, we have agricultural issues, which are shared by so many others in the CERF region. Finally, on the western end, Placer is very urban with fast development and job growth. I think everyone in this meeting can envision their region in one of these areas that I've just described. As we all share many concerns and opportunities, by having a common understanding between the various subregions, it will strengthen cooperation and allow for greater success in this effort. The CERF goal is to establish high road jobs, which allows for supporting families and giving people opportunities. In Placer County, we believe that education and opportunities can be leveraged to help everyone achieve high road jobs. CERF hopes to leverage opportunities, so all of us should be thinking of programs and funding in our respective areas and how those might be leveraged to create even greater opportunities than we initially thought. I want to thank all of you for participating in this effort and encourage you to watch for various opportunities that will help your communities to grow in ways that will benefit all of us in years to come. This is one of those rare times when you are being funded to think big thoughts, especially to implement those big ideas. And I'm excited to see what successes come out of this group. So I thank you all very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with your group. Any questions or?
Oops, I was on mute there. Thank you so much, Supervisor. It's wonderful to see you. So wonderful to have you here and have your thoughts about not only how can this program speak to the needs and the assets of Placer County, but to our region as a whole. So thank you. And I want to thank everybody who came today. Appreciate your time and your attention, and have a nice evening, and we'll see you again soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.